Здравствуйте, друзья! Я Владимир Маринович. Сегодня представляю уникальный бизнес-скоп на канале медиаметрикспитер. Вы знаете, что всегда я приглашаю тех предпринимателей, тех людей, которые влияют на предпринимательство и в Петербурге, и в Ленинградской области, и в России. И вы знаете, что всегда наши интервью, они очень практичные, они очень смысловые. И сегодня уникальный бизнес-скоп, потому что мне удалось пригласить на интервью Луи Пузен. Это человек, который имел прямое отношение к созданию интернета. Тот человек, который был у истоков интернета. И я уверен, что это будет очень интересно поговорить с таким человеком, который задал в большой степени тренды развития интернет-бизнеса в том числе. Луи, здравствуйте.
Hello, my friends. My name is Vladimir Malinovich. I am directing the channel on this tube, and I am glad to see Lui Puzen on the internet issues, because it's the very important topic now to discuss.
И всегда первый блок вопросов в каждом бизнес-скопе – это как вы пришли к тому, что вы стали интернет-энтрепренером, как вы пришли к тому, что вы стали, в принципе, заниматься вопросами создания сетей данных, сетей обмена данными, и что в результате и привело к созданию интернета.
So the first block of questions to Mr. Louis is, how did you come to this entrepreneurship in internet field that came into resulted into internet horizon?
Well, initially I had training as an engineer. I was from École Polytechnique in France, but that doesn't really teach you about doing anything particular, just mathematics, physics, astronomy, statistics, whatever. So when we go to industry, you have to learn everything in practice. My first industry was telecommunication, telephony actually. But I stayed there for a few years, but I was mildly interested because it was not really innovative. Someday I read an article in a French newspaper talking about an exhibition about what was not yet called computers. It was called electronic calculators. And I was fascinated with that. So I decided I would switch to that company. It was a Machine Bull, which was a French company, even though it had a Norwegian name. So I was hired there, and immediately I was excited with the way we developed things. It was not yet programmed at the time. We were only using punch cards. But there was so many things we could invent with punch card machines. So,
just a moment, now we will translate.
Okay. В самом начале я работал в университете и занимался программированием, а также различными телекоммуникационными устройствами. И также мне было очень интересно развивать это направление, потому что я видел перспективу в развитии интернета в дальнейшем.
Это было связано с чистой математикой, и откуда вообще возникла идея создания сетей?
So, was it connected to mathematics itself, or what from was the idea of a network creation arise?
You know, that was in 1960. So there was no networks at the time. They were not even computers. So
это было в 1960-х годах, и в то время никаких сетей не было, а также не было и компьютеров тогда.
So just using computers was a real innovative thing. Is how to use computers. So when I was some years with Bull, the company de Machine Bull, they had financial problems because they started developing a huge computer, which they called Gamma 60, to compete with IBM. At that time, IBM was selling the first 700 machines, 704, 705, which were able to do huge computations. So Machine Bull wanted to compete with that, but they were short of money. So they got in agreement with an American company called General Electric, whereby they would access information within the General Electric labs and also able to market in France or in Europe the big General Electric machines, the G600 series. Well, when they had taken a part, a share of the capital in the Machine Bull, General Electric started to send their own engineers, and they had a discussion in groups, and I couldn't find what they were saying because I knew a little bit of German, but I didn't know English. So I decided if I don't know English, I have no career in computing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, please, may I ask you 2 minutes for our translator?
Okay. So, и в то время был бум в технологиях, и я видел, как развивается эта сфера, и было заключено соглашение с IBM, и также
Вы можете задать вопрос, уточняющий.
Okay. So, excuse me, and well, machine boom, and how did you see yourself in this field also? I have missed them.
Well, in Machine Bull, I see that in order to have a career in this business, I had to know English. So I asked my boss to find some way to send me to the US. Well, they were not very clever in finding some financial support. So I met at an IFIP Congress. IFIP is the Federation of Information Processing. It's a worldwide non-profit association. So in a congress in Munich, Germany, I met Fernando Corbato, who was the director of the computing center at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So we had a little bit of a discussion. I said I'd be interested to go to the US. So he proposed to hire me in the computing center because he was at that time developing the first big time-sharing system called CTSS. It means compatible time-sharing system, working on IBM system, on IBM machines. So he made me a proposal, and I became for being a system programmer at MIT. So I went to MIT with a wife and 2 children, and I found some place to live in Boston, and I started to work on this new time-sharing system. I learned English, I learned the American way of life, and after 2.5 years I thought it was a good time to come back to France. The real motivation is I didn't want my 2 children to become American kids. So by coming back to France, I could educate them in French culture.
Okay, now, okay. So, чтобы заниматься этой сферой, мне необходимо было выучить английский язык. И я попал по рекомендации своего профессора в Соединенные Штаты, Массачусетский технологический институт, MTI. И также мои жена и 2 детей поехали со мной туда, и я выучил там английский и американский уклад жизни. И также я стал разбираться в этом вопросе в Соединенных Штатах уже непосредственно.
Вы помните тот день и что подтолкнуло к тому, чтобы пришла идея всемирной сети, всемирной паутины?
Do you remember that day, or what was the trigger for you to make the idea of World Wide Web?
Okay, the idea of making the World Wide Web came later, because after I was back to France, I was since the Machine Bull had become Bull General Electric, they were Americans, partially managing this new company. Well, I was actually considered as a, as a guru, and since they were marketing General Electric machines, I was taken with an American engineer to sell, at least to make clients of the General Electric machines. So we went in many countries in Europe, and after 2 years of that, I was a little bit tired of visiting the various airports, and I asked the board to give me a real project. They gave me one, the French meteorology. The French meteorology was a special project because they deal only with weather data, and the people at the meteorology were not really trained in computing. They were very good in making mathematical models for the weather, but not for organizing big programs. So I became, in a way, in charge of that system, and I developed a completely new operating system on a control data computer. It was a completely new architecture. They had a big central computer with a lot of peripheral computers. It was not at all like the kind of machines we know today. That was, after 2 years, it was working. And since I was, at the time, I was actually an employee, an engineer within let's say, a consulting company called Steria. This company actually was renting me to the French meteorology. And once they had their system working, they didn't need me anymore. So my contract stopped, and after that I looked for another job.
Okay. So, и мне предложили заниматься проектом по французской метеорологии, но я понял, что эти люди, которые там работали, не смыслят в интернете, а исключительно занимаются сводками погоды. И затем я
разработал модель? Вы можете уточнить.
So, and then you develop a special model.
Special operating system.
Ага. Да, и затем я разработал специальную операционную систему, чтобы помочь им в компьютерной технологии.
Прогнозирование погоды?
Прогнозирование погодных условий. И...
Окей, хорошо. Когда возникла в принципе идея о передаче данных через сети?
When was the idea of data transferring via networks arise?
Indeed, I was coming to that. I had finished with the Weather Bureau, but while developing that special system, I had partially invented, but not entirely, techniques for inter-system communications. Because as you certainly know, the data about the weather are not fabricated in the country where you predict the weather. They're coming in the northern hemisphere. They come from the north. They were coming from United States and so on. They travel the Atlantic, and they are collected by a computer in every country in Europe, from which they built weather models. They calculate the future weather, and they transmit those data to the east, Poland, Russia, and so on. So there was a need for intercomputer communication. And while I was at the Weather Bureau, I had already designed how the operating system should work in order to establish intercomputer communications. And in doing that, I had somehow invented something I didn't know yet at that time. It was Unix. Unix with the pipes, where you have a process, pushing data into a pipe, which goes to another process and so on. So I had developed a system which were doing in-process communication through pipes. I didn't know it was Unix yet. So after that, when I had finished my work at the French Weather Bureau, I was hired by a company called Simca, which was actually a car manufacturer. I was there because I had heard that I should have more training in applications. So I went to Simca, and there was nothing to do with networking at all. The work in Simca was producing the huge pile of papers which were used by the workshops, by the shops in the Simca company to make cars. Mm-hmm. So making cars is basically having suppliers, collecting parts, putting the car together.
It was really pivot.
Yeah.
Just one. Да, прошу.
Okay. So, и в погодном управлении данные передавали с запада на восток.
Итак, возникла эта идея передачи данных.
Да, возникла идея передачи данных в бюро погоды и также коммуникация между компьютерами.
Замечательно. Потом...
Да, и это имело собственное название Unix. Через различные кабели данные передавались по системе Unix. После работы в французском погодном бюро я получил контракт в Simco. Simco — это фирма по производству сетей. Я изначально даже не думал, что смогу работать в Simco, потому что я никогда не занимался этим. Но, тем не менее, так сложилось, что я стал работать и также предлагать интернет-технологии.
Окей. Кто были те люди, которые составляли вашу команду при разработке базового проекта всемирной сети?
Who were your people who developed your team while World Wide Web developing? Who were your team?
They were not yet in the wider, because at the Meteo, it was in 1967-68, and when I switched to Simca, it was 1970. There was still no computer networks yet. But then, after my work at Meteo was finished, oh, by the way, the system I built at the Meteo worked for 15 years, which was quite unusual in the traditions of operating systems. So after that, I went to Simca, and when I was in Simca, I understood quite early that I would not like to stay there for many years. Too much pressure, too much infighting within the company between various clients and so on. So I was lucky. I had some phone calls from a few colleagues, because at the time there was a new policy in France, which has been set up in the aftermath of the General de Gaulle's government by someone who was elected president after de Gaulle. It was Pompidou, Georges Pompidou. And they introduced the policy of developing a policy of more autonomy from the American products. And they created a special agency under the Prime Ministry in the government to develop expertise in computing systems. They also created a consortium with Plessey in England, with Philips in the Netherlands, with Siemens in Germany, and it should also have Olivetti joining in, except it didn't happen in my time. And that was supposedly be a new block of European competence, European expertise. And they were looking for someone to build a network in France, a computer network, because the Americans had started to work on ARPANET. They started to work on ARPANET in 1979, but 1979, 80, yes. But it was not operational yet. It was just beginning. They were publishing papers, but there was so few papers on computer networks at the time that I knew all those papers. And while I was, in Simca, I thought that's the place I want to go. But that was exactly the reason why I got this phone call from my colleagues who were close to this new agency. They were looking for someone to, someone to lead a project of computer networks. So I switched again to the French agency, and I decided we will do it. We will do it, and I gave the name Cyclades or Cyclades. That's where we got this new acronym. Cyclades are islands around Greece, and I think it was a good image. When you have a computer network, you have isolated computers. You want to make them interconnected. So having such of islands, such as a Cyclade, was the idea of putting them together, with relationships of some kind.
Excuse me, for 1 minute.
Okay. Вы говорите о 1967-1968 годах, но я работал в Семка в 1970-м, начиная с 1970-го, и мне не нравилась эта работа по причине большого давления в корпорации, а также различных противоборств внутри Семка среди сотрудников. И после этого, как раз в это время во Франции началась политика Шарля де Голля, а после этого президента Жоржа Помпиду. И был необходим человек с опытом в компьютерной деятельности, в управлении проектами в области компьютеров, интернет, который бы также умел выстраивать сети между компьютерами от изолированных к между соединенными компьютерами, межподключенными вместе во Франции. В это время я также сотрудничал с компанией Philips в Нидерландах и компанией Siemens в Германии. Это уже был 1979 год. И я работал на французское агентство, и проект назывался Cyclades. Он был базирован в Греции.
Okay. А когда в первый раз произошло коммерческое использование сети интернет? И какой это был пример? Какие компании в первый раз использовали для извлечения дохода? Возможности, которые представляют соединенные в сеть компьютеры?
So, which was the first time to make profit from the internet, and how were companies working in this field?
Well, the first time there was profit in internet, you mean in the US only, is when they started using the internet for advertising, pushing various advertising pages. But they only started that in 1987, perhaps, yeah. Before that, there was a network called Internet, but it was not used for money. Initially, and it was no money making at all. It was a number of various research centers plus industry that included IBM, not control data, IBM, and probably the places like BBN, Borberg Newman, and a few other ones, which I don't remember at the moment. But they were actually, they had contracts to work on that. So most of the money were coming from the Advanced Research Project Agency, in other words, ARPA. So that was in 81 or 82, I guess. No, I'm sorry. 10 years earlier, 71 or 72. And at that time, I was producing the design for CICLAD, which was different from ARPANET, because the ARPANET network initially was a single system centralized in the United States. And in order to use it, you have to be one of those ARPANET users. There was no way to interconnect several networks. It was not part of the design made by the American. So I had taken a trip around the US to talk to various centers which were working for ARPANET to sound out their concepts and their feelings. And I came back with the idea that this was absolutely not acceptable in Europe. First, because Europe is not a centralized country. Mm-hmm. Europe has a lot of countries which have different culture, different principles, different governments, different education. And I say, well, the only way to make a system worldwide is to make a system with independent networks which are interconnected. So that's what the design for CICLAD. So I worked on that in 1972. And we implemented it. And in 1973, we make a demonstration, we make a demo to the various important ministries in France, the telecom industry, the finance ministry, and so on. And so it was accepted that we should continue on this project. And then in 1974, President Pompidou died, and we had a new president called Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. And they decided to destroy everything we had set up, change policy completely, not trying to compete with the American, but come back to something more, let's say, industrial-wise perhaps, but something which would rely mainly on American for big products and on the European for some less demanding deployment. So at this point, there was not much we could do. I switched again to the French telecom research place called CNET, Centre National Center for Telecommunication Studies. And then I was mainly involved in standardization, working in Brussels with various delegates from various European countries. After a few years, I had enough again of doing that. I switched to a new institution created by the French Telecom for educating master of business administration students. But it was because at the time they understood that in large companies they needed people who had expertise in marketing, organization, finance, but no expertise at all in computing.
I have a question. Кто из учеников стал впоследствии сильным выдающимся интернет-предпринимателем?
So, who of your students became a strong entrepreneur after you?
Okay.
What's the name?
It still takes some time.
We have a time.
My life is long.
Super.
Okay, so after, since I was still involved in computing and telecom, I thought that we should start trying to resurrect the idea of becoming more independent or more autonomous in Europe. But we couldn't do it in the middle of the 80s because we didn't have the money for that. And it was not yet clear what the internet would become. You may remember in the mid-80s, there was no web. Web only became available in 1988. But let's say 1990 for the people who wanted to use it in a reasonably comfortable interface. So in the meantime, most of the development in computing in Europe were essentially remote processing systems based on a centralized computer using essentially, you might say, client-to-server protocols, which in a way were regressive, because in the 70s we had developed time sharing, which was centralized power but multiplicity of independent users, and we were back to client-server, while the client had no much choice except using the application offered by the server. So it was a regression in the concepts.
I ask you 1 minute.
Okay. So, и необходимо было больше автономия, и интернет только вообще для всеобщего пользования появился в конце 1980-х годов, а даже в 1990-м. Контролировался интерфейс и разрабатывались системы удаленного доступа с клиентскими протоколами. Также было разделено время пользования интернетом. Это развивался таймшеринг. И в это время также было уточнение по увеличению клиентского доступа в интернет.
Окей. А какие сейчас видит Луи тренды в развитии интернета? Что будет происходить с интернетом? Есть ли альтернативы интернету? Как он видит?
Mr. Louis, which new trends do you see in internet developing nowadays, and how you see the internet development yourself, please?
Okay. Well, the trends is still, I would say, still in a way client to server, even though it may be games, it may be developing application and so on. It's still client to server, even though the local equipment has become very powerful. It usually depends on the GAFAs. Do you know the GAFA? Either Google, Apple, Facebook, and so on. And therefore, we still need to push in the direction of getting more independence in not only in the way of creating systems, but in the way of using them. So what's the trend now? Well, it's partially, I think in the US there is no trend to become really autonomous because they think their real motivation or their target, their goal, is to become the master of the world. No, they just want to be a sort of a hyper-powerful companies which decide what has to be done. They are more powerful than many countries in terms of money, and they have a lot of advance in technical matters, and they also can hire the best people from other countries. That means they are actually doing a sort of selection of from the whole world to get the best engineers. So what actually other countries, well, like Russia, especially like China. China has developed its own network because they understood very quickly. They understood between 1963-65 when we met them in Geneva that actually computing was not something which is let's say, unavoidably under the American influence. They thought they had the competence, the expertise to develop that in China. They couldn't do it in 2 years. It actually took 10 years, but they were sufficiently, let's say, good in predicting the future that even 10 years is not a problem. You know, just have to work on a real well-defined target for 10 years. So which they did. Well, in the meantime, the Americans had picked what they had done for Cyclad. They developed the Internet, which was no longer ARPANET, and therefore it was based on the model I had defined in France. And fortunately, that's the only American could do it, because the French telecom and the other European telecom had not considered the model I had made as acceptable for the telecom. The model using datagrams, independent packets which travel their way on the way, they could not understand that. So fortunately, the Americans picked the model and developed it under the Internet name. And from that, and the web, but the web was also developed by Europeans. It was developed by mainly 2 engineers. One was British, Tim Berners-Lee, and the other one was Belgium. It was Robert Caillot.
Do you know them personally?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a minute.
Translate. So,
and therefore, the trends now.
Just a minute.
Okay. So, система базируется на связи между клиентом и сервером, от передачи данных клиента на сервер. Это мы можем говорить как об играх, так и о приложениях, applications. Например, Facebook, Apple, Google. Что касается разработчиков, то Соединенные Штаты, конечно, во всем мире играют самую важную роль. И это очень сильная экономика и очень сильная страна, и они дают всему миру решения, принимают решения для всего мирового сообщества, и работают лучшие специалисты, и также из других стран, лучшие инженеры в этой стране, в Соединенных Штатах. Что касается развития интернета в Китае, то он в этой стране развивался в течение 10 лет, что не являлось большой проблемой, потому что 10 лет это был реальный срок для развития интернета в Китае. Также я могу назвать 2 человек, которые помогали мне в этом деле. Это Тим Бернерс-Ли из Великобритании и Uber из Бельгии.
Замечательно. Над какими проектами, над какими продуктами вы трудитесь сейчас? Что от вас придет в интернет в ближайшее время?
So, which products are you working on nowadays, and what will you transfer the closest time?
Well, since we had the idea, of reintroduce the idea of autonomous systems, autonomous networks, and when we've seen that the Chinese were doing it, we had a lot of talks in France as to whether we actually should go on business and do that. We had, by the way, created another non-profit association called Eurolink, which initially was created, I think, in 1982, 2002, in order to educate people how to use non-Latin languages in the internet. At that time, there was no way of using anything but ASCII. So we knew the Chinese had also developed some methods of representing Chinese in internet in ways which were not at all standardized at the time. So we tried to educate people that we should have essentially native language in the internet. And in order to do that, we thought we should be able not to talk, not to write, but essentially make demonstrations. Develop something which does it instead of discussing about how to do it. That's why we created OpenRoute, a company. Actually, the institutional name, I mean the legal name is savoir-faire, but we don't use that name for marketing. For marketing, we use the name of a service, which is OpenRoute. And this service is essentially based on the very same principle of the existing internet. We use the same protocol, absolutely nothing new, but we use a different business model. First, we use a separate DNS network, totally independent from ICANN, and therefore we use a separate route. That means we don't have the same. We are not limited to the names which are acceptable within ICANN, and therefore we can provide service for people who want different names in different scripts. And it's much lower cost than ICANN. But also, we think that we don't want to rent those names. Renting names means collecting money every year. So a lot of administrative tasks. And also, it makes the system more expensive because when you collect money, you have to pay people for that. And then you may have trouble with people who don't pay and so on. So it just adds cost for nothing. So by selling the name, the clients are just proprietary of their name. They don't have to worry about things like bureaucratic constraints put up by ICANN. And they also are responsible for the name.
Okay, just a minute.
Yes, please.
Задайте вопрос.
Mr. Louis, so a question about OpenRoute. You mean that it's commercial name, but how did you operate with the system?
Well, it's very basic techniques which everybody is using. Since we have computers which are name servers, in other words, since we have a different name base, we have different systems which are available, but available through just an IP number, not a URL. No? And therefore, they can be used for connecting to any computing system which is either part of ICANN or outside of ICANN, either way. So we globalize internet instead of making it limited to whatever is offered by ICANN. And therefore, we need people to be able to run that system. Therefore, we need engineers. We need an administrator. We have an administrator in Germany who is a highly competent engineer. He not only he is able to operate all the network servers, but also he is very good at developing something that is presently the major toxic part of internet. I mean, attacks, not spam so much, but DDoS, let's say distributed denial of service, a technique whereby the attackant, the the pirates send millions of messages to the same computer in order to make it completely out of function.
Okay, just a minute.
So, мы работаем с IP-адресами, не UAL, а именно IP-номера, с глобальным интернетом. Этим руководят квалифицированные инженеры. Самый главный администратор находится в Германии. Он очень высококвалифицированный, высококомпетентный человек. И наша система отправляет миллионы различных сообщений между компьютерами.
Друзья, вы смотрите программу «Бизнес-коп» на канале медиаметрикспитер. Я, Владимир Маринович, основатель бизнес-школы «Вверх», беру интервью у замечательного человека, у Луи Пузена, человек, который имел непосредственное отношение к созданию всемирной паутины, к паутине интернет. Луи, я хочу пожелать вам всего доброго, всего светлого за то, что вы сделали для интернета, потому что сейчас представить себе мир без интернета в принципе невозможно. И желаю вам удачи и дальнейших успехов и в бизнесе, и в ваших научных исследованиях. Спасибо вам большое.
My dear, you watch the program with Vladimir Marinovich on the channel mediametricspitер, and I, on behalf of myself and my company, would appreciate you, Mr. Louis, very kindly, and to thank you for all your activity for world society, because without you, I can't imagine just the world now. How would we live without the internet, without the World Wide Web? Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have a leaflet which summarizes what we're doing.
У меня с собой распечатка, которая является небольшим резюме о том, что мы сейчас делаем.
И мы обязательно упомянем в анонсе программы на канале медиаметрикспитер о том, какие могут быть выполнены работы компании OpenRoot. Спасибо вам большое.
So we will, of course, make note on mediametricspitер, our channel, about your work in OpenRoot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All.
Just a moment. Будьте добры, сейчас вы могли бы отсюда выйти?
Okay.
Да?